All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Telivy MSP podcast. So excited to introduce our guest today. Josh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I thought you were going to do that, Jeremy. No. My name's Josh. Jeremy, thank you so much for being allowed and invited to take a part of this. My name's Josh Gossett. I own a managed IT company in Bowling Green, Kentucky, a little north of Nashville for you guys. Been in the industry about 20 years. Owned my company about 17. And I guess I'm here today because, like most of you guys, you're trying to figure out how do we get to the next level? How did we get to where we are today? All those things. I am the owner, but I also like to say I'm also the CEO and the janitor as well. So principal led seller guy. I understand that pain and frustration. Primarily, what I do for my MSP is all of the sales, marketing, biz dev side of things. So um, that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
Wow, thank you so much, Josh. That's extremely relatable. I am a founder as well, and did my own thing for several years, and I totally relate the CEO and the janitor. I think a lot of our other MSPs will relate as well. Everybody, for me, hey everybody, I'm Jeremy, head of partnerships at Telivy, and we're an automated cybersecurity risk assessments platform for over 100 MSPs. MSPs like Halt Data Solutions, Triada Networks, and Level 5 Management love Telivy because MSPs use Telivy to run automated risk assessments to win new clients and provide quarterly reports to existing clients, help clients meet compliance, and reduce risk assessments that take 7-8 days manually to under 5 hours with Telivy, fully automated. All right, Josh, let's jump right into it. Can you tell us about Core Tech, the problems that you solve for your clients, and the solutions and services you offer?
Yeah, so that's the word, right? I would like to think, and if you're listening out there, I'd like to think, even though we are all sharing this space of managed IT services, right? Obviously, we're here to bring managed IT solutions to the marketplace. Of course, cybersecurity is driving everything right now, everything from just basic endpoint protection all the way up to compliance as a service and everything in between. So I guess, the line card, as it were, is probably like most of the people listening. We do managed IT, we do help desk, we do on sites, we do remote, we try to protect our clients and so forth. But I think the real answer to that question is we try to align ourselves with the businesses we serve. On the one hand, make sure that we're having business conversations about their goals, where they're trying to get to as a company, and how that relates to their use of technology. But then also shore up those what I call the holes in the boat. Right, where is technology negatively impacting your ability to achieve those goals? Is it through things like infrastructure, right? Is it just as simple as hardware and software? I don't think it is. I think it's really more about you are a business, you are trying to get somewhere, you have problems and you have issues, and there are implications to those issues. And that's what we try to solve through how we approach, I guess you could say, a consultative approach to deploying IT solutions.
Very interesting. And I noticed, the way you framed that, having a business discussion or a business first discussion, and it seems like you're using technology as a tool to support the main business. This is interesting to me because when typical folks think of IT, they think of the technology. So
Yeah.
so I'm curious, why did you emphasize business first before the
Uh,
technology?
Sure. I think it's because of the common tie that binds probably yourself and maybe other people listening, and that is this, Jeremy. I've been in the industry, as I said, 2 decades thereabouts, and not one time in my whole life have I ever met somebody that was so excited about IT or so excited about cybersecurity. They jumped out of bed early on a Sunday morning and went, "Hey, come on! I'm so excited to go get sold IT services today. I can't wait to get that cybersecurity thing installed. Oh my gosh, let's go." Um, it's just not going to happen. So I share this, I think, distinct pleasure with everybody listening, is that we sell a product and a service nobody wants to buy. That doesn't mean it's not valuable. It doesn't mean that
Mm,
it's not necessary,
mm,
but it's not sexy, right? It's not fun. It's not a big screen TV, a vacation package. It's not a luxury good. Okay,
wow.
what we provide to the industry, to every business, is important and it's valuable. But I think it comes bolted on to how we're helping their business as an entity, right? I just simply don't think it's as simple as the products that we plug in or the software that we install. I think it goes far beyond that. And because I think that's true, us as managed services companies and stewards of our product, we kind of have a moral imperative to be educators, as well as solution providers. And I think that comes with a certain level of business acumen to be able to go into somebody's business, talk to a business owner or a manager, be that like a COO type, a controller on the operation
Mm-hmm.
side, be that a sales manager type, those different sort of personas, if you will. But I feel like in this day and age, as an MSP, you have to have the capacity to have a business conversation, to be able to make sure that what we happen to sell, because we just happen to sell IT solutions, is a fit for our clients in the way that they need them.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love how you broke that down. I'm going to ask you some more questions about how you communicate with your clients. It seems like you have a very good understanding of your customers, and I guess that's a great segue. Can you tell us a little bit about your customers? Maybe share a case study story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
what
I'm
was their experience end to end? Yeah.
sure. So I'll go broad and then I'll go narrow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably like a lot of people listening. We're sort of industry agnostic, right? To us, as we got going, early, especially in the early years, to us, if a human being touched a computer and that computer talked to the internet, we were your Huckleberry, right? It didn't matter if you were a plumber, a neurologist, a factory, right? To us, it what kind of started with the use of the technology. But over time, things have coalesced, and we figured out that both in terms of size and scale, right? Because I think as MSPs, when we think about where do we fit best, sometimes that's, well, where are you located? How many users do you have? Are you using smart devices? Are you, remote and cloud? Questions like that, the demographic type questions. But then also, within your industry, how do you use that stuff, right? So I would make the simple comparison. Let's say somebody in manufacturing, a large factory with three rolling shifts, hundreds of employees, and everything's about production, production, production. That client, I think, is extremely different in terms of how they view, use, and suffer from the loss of use of technology than, let's say, a small independent medical clinic, right? Somebody whose hours of operation are mostly towards the, say, middle of the week. Maybe they have a dozen or so staff, but that client may have needs for things like compliancy through things like HIPAA. So
Mm,
I think while the tie that binds is the technology, the widgets, et cetera, I think when you think about what those clients actually need and the problems they actually suffer through, they're extremely different. And so being able to tailor your message and your approach to each of those makes sense. So that's the broad answer. The narrow answer
mm-hmm.
is, I like to joke in my MSP, we kind of accidentally specialized in medical. I say accidentally because we didn't start out that way, as I shared. We just happened to be in a marketplace. I'm in rural Kentucky. There just happened to be in my market a lot of sort of small private practice medical. And so over the years, we started finding opportunities of little, owners of clinics or physicians with maybe a couple of staff and a practice manager that needed help. And so over time, as we encountered those, it dawned on us that, hey, when we stepped back and we looked at our Rolodex, all of a sudden we had a lot of medical folks. And so the need to become HIPAA verified, the need to get educated on omnibus and high tech and what it meant to be a business associate, and they were covered in all that kind of language, right? So for us, that's what I found. I think if you were to go through my entire Rolodex, we still have lots and lots of people in various industries, but that'd be the biggest one for us. Second biggest one for us would be manufacturing. The large
Hmm.
factories; those guys can be really challenging. Things are very minute by minute. But those are some examples of who we're working for. I don't know if you want to know more specifics than that or not.
Yeah, I'd love to understand with both your healthcare clients and your manufacturing clients, what do they come to you for? Is this a breach? Is this a preventative measure? When you solve their initial problem, what's the solution? And what's the ongoing managed service? Uh, yeah, what's the service? Yeah, the ongoing
Yeah,
service.
that's a really good question. I would love to tell you that every time the phone rings, there's some hot, active, hair on fire need. I would love to tell you that every time we go into a business, it's, oh, my server is down, or oh, we've been ransomed, or I'm locked out of my database, or that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, those things do happen. But what
Hmm.
I find in the world of I'm going to use the word sales here. 5 to 10% of the time, that's the situation. This active need, something that's
Hmm.
needed right now. Help me out. Hair's on fire. I need you. Right? It's the proverbial firefighter. But quite frankly, 95% of the time, it's more of a latent need. It's things like, they're losing. I'll use the example of manufacturing. Manufacturing is all about efficiency. It's about widgets per hour, right? Hours of assembly lines working. And so in their world, it's all about, hey, I need that line and my staff in constant production. Every minute of every hour of every day, things just have to work. I got to fill those crates to create product. That product has to get to my clients. And so, in a lot of cases, that need might be as simple as efficiencies, right? It might be as simple as, hey, we have a technology infrastructure, but on an hour to hour, minute by minute basis, how do we tighten that up? How do we keep our staff working? How do we keep our production high? In the case of, let's say, the medical, oftentimes I'm going to be honest, the answer is education. I have found there's this irony in medical. Everybody as a in medical and healthcare, obviously they're aware of things like HIPAA. They have to protect their patients' information. They have to protect their staff. We have all these regulations depending on where in the spectrum you are. But the ironic thing is, I have found that not everybody cares about that in the same way. Not everybody takes those things as seriously as you would like.
Mhm.
And so, quite frankly, in many cases, when we're being asked into that business, it may begin with something as simple as, hey, we have a growing practice. Our office manager, whose job title, by the way, is office manager, not IT pro, is getting saddled with the things that aren't working, printers not printing, scanners not scanning, internet running slow,
Mm.
all that basic stuff. But then when we go into the business and we start asking good, educated questions, what we find is they're just dealing with the things in front of their face, the urgent things that are distracting them and disrupting them. Because at the end of the day, that a hospital or a medical facility, as an example, what they care about is patient flow. That's it in a nutshell, right? They of course want to protect their people and information, but for the most part, to them, their whole world begins and ends with patient flow. So what we find is once we get that initial call and we're in there, we're trying to have conversations about, Mr. Practice Manager, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important do you view being HIPAA compliant and protecting your patient's data is? And they may say, "Oh, that's a 10. That's obviously very important to us. We would never want to be have a breach, or we would never want to be in the news." But then we investigate further, and then we ask questions like, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you feel like you have that taken care of? Are you meeting about it? Are you attesting for it? Are you making investments in hardware, software, consulting, etc.? And you find oftentimes that answer is a 1, 2, or 3. So you have this misalignment, right? And so many cases, what we're doing at that point, in what we call discovery, right? The self-defining word, we're discovering about the practice is, where are those gaps? You're telling me that this is important to you as a practice, but you're also showing me that there's not been a lot of time, energy, or money spent to achieve that goal. That's where we come in. That's where we have educated conversations about how we can close that gap.
Wow, that's really brilliant. And so I want to dive deeper into your sales process, this discovery process here. Can you take can you take us through, when you have that meeting, you start asking those questions, um, you know, what happens after that? What happens after that point,
Uh,
right? So you ask them the two questions, you've defined the misalignment. Now what?
Yeah. Well, so hopefully what happens after that at some point is they sign an MSP deal, right? But no, I follow a pretty structured process, Jeremy. And I would say this to all MSPs out there. I want to say this and then answer your question. I think sometimes as us MSP owners, especially those of us who are still wearing all the hats, it's very difficult to get the right training, the right business, personal, professional development to become who you need to become. And I say that from a place of, I think a lot of people in the MSP seat, we're technical experts, right? We understand the widgets and the hardware, the software. We get excited about those things. But the reality is there's this whole learning curve about becoming a business professional.
Yeah.
It's I'll reference an excellent book for those people that are readers. The E Myth, Michael Gerber. Strongly recommend, if you've not read that book, to read it. And I won't spoil the book, but the basic premise is that just because you are great at technology doesn't mean you're great at owning a company that provides technology services. So I want to kind of plant that seed, and then I'm going to answer your question in this way. For me, it was all about finding my initial mentor and getting the right kind of training and flipping a switch in mindset. I had to go from um, I'm an IT professional and I want to sell IT services to I'm a business professional who can grow that as portfolio and have the right conversations with my client. So, in all of that, my preamble to that is this: I have an extremely well defined sales process that begins with a marketing message and a first interaction when that client and I are engaging. The goal as we go through that process is simply closing on a next step. I want to have that initial appointment where I can quickly vet is this a fit for both of us? I ask diagnostic questions, simple things like, you know, the footprint of the company, how they use technology, the number of people, are they remote, all the things you would expect. And then from there, conducting a very thorough discovery process, which I'm happy to expound on if you like. Um, and the reason for that is thus, if I'm going to go to the table and I'm going to sell to you, if I'm going to attempt to convince you should buy my services, I want to prove what I'm saying to you with facts. I want to
Yeah.
prove to you that I have quantifiable things, be that risk based or goal based, right? Um, about here's what we see, here's why that sucks, and here's what we're going to do about it, right? And then from there, it's just a matter of pitching them the right service that fits, um, and helping them understand that, at least for me, I don't know. I know there's still some MSPs out there that are doing old school IT, they're break fix or block time or whatever. That's fine. For me, I'm more interested in not being just a transaction, but aligning with that business as a legitimate partner. And I know trusted advisor, that's a phrase that gets abused a lot. I know you hear that all the time. But for me, it's coming to this person and saying, look, I want to come in and function essentially as your chief information officer. I want to be a
Mm-hmm.
part of this business as it grows. I want to be part of the strategy. I want for you to be educating me about where you're going. I want to be educating you about what's going on in the IT space and be a part of that. So for me, that process is extremely defined. I learned that process through Alex Rogers, who founded a company called Chartech. So if you've not experienced that, I highly recommend it. We're very blessed in this industry. There's a lot of people in our industry who are working mightily to put great content and great value through sales training, marketing, recruiting, all the various camps. But for me personally, Jeremy, that's where it started for me. And for a lot of years, I have followed that methodology and it works to a T. That old saying, there's a thousand ways to skin a cat. That's absolutely true. This is one that works very well. So for me, I made the decision, or I should say the admission, that my company was a sales organization first. And
Mm.
then I decided to commit to that as an idea. I have to, if I want to be secure as a company, I have to constantly be selling more. I need to be adding accounts. I need to be adding revenue. I need to be protecting against attrition. So to me, that was an important problem to solve. I solved it about 10 or 12 years ago, and I've never looked back since.
Wow.
I think that if you put that in place, something that you can follow, shall we say, religiously, start to finish, this step and then this step and then this step, for sales and marketing, it's no different than what we expect on the operation side. We expect when we deploy a server, that happens the same way every time. When we deploy a firewall, that happens the same way every time. When I launch a software or do a platform upgrade, that happens the same way every time. I think you should apply that same thinking to your business as it relates to prospecting, sales, closing, and objection handling.
Wow, that's incredible. And you just mentioned that you you hit the sales milestone in terms of like learning or experience, right? 12 years ago. I understand that you founded Cortex 17 years ago. I'm going to ask you about
Hmm?
that later.
Yeah,
I'm gonna try to remember that. I really want to ask that. But jumping back to a point you said, I want to show the client what sucks, right? Those one out of the three things you want to show them,
yeah.
and with facts. This is very important. With facts, quantifiable facts. How do you do that from a for an MSP, right, who's listening right now? They also want to do what you do. They want to show with quantifiable facts. What is your process like? Do you go in and you do it manually? Do you use tools? Do you run risk assessments? Do you ask questions and then sort of use that? Or yeah, how do you do it?
Yes, yes, and yes, Jeremy. And so,
Okay.
excellent question. Very happy to answer that. When I heard you at the beginning, talking about a tool, all right. So
Mhm.
here's in a nutshell how it works. For me, a discovery is a two-prong approach. Okay. The first prong is a highly technical one. I think there's no getting around that we got to do the proverbial pop the hood and run the
Yep.
255-point inspection, see what the heck we're dealing with, right?
Yep.
That is absolutely done through the use of tools. Furthermore, it should be done with your technical resources. So if that's
Mm-hmm.
you in your MSP, if you are the technical mindset, you are the technical expert, that's your job. And you come in with a at least one tool, but ideally more, right? And you get into the technical nuts and bolts as best you can. Survey everything on that network. Understand exactly what assets are we going to be asked to manage, where are they at in their life cycle, what problems exist, if any. And this is where we get into risk assessment. This is where we get into things like pen testing. You know, are there
Mm.
cybersecurity concerns right now today? or through lack of maintenance? Are there going to be cybersecurity concerns tomorrow? Basic things like, hey, how has patching been handled? How's Active Directory been managed? Have you checked on your backup lately? Okay. Oftentimes we find that you just don't know what you don't know, right? You've heard that 1,000 times. Business owners don't know. Nobody's going in and popping their server and doing this kind of analysis. So that's the first prong. Highly technical. Evaluate everything you can about the hardware, the software, security, the rack, etc. But then the second piece, and the piece that I think is often missed, is what I call the business discovery. It's talking with the business owners about the issues in their business, good and bad. So yeah, you heard me say what sucks, but here's the other thing: you can have a positive version of that as well as a negative. I'll give you an example. A negative version is hey, we've got computers that are failing all the time, or we're having to restart computers, or the printer's jamming up. We all know that stuff. Those things
Yeah.
suck. We're going to find a way to fix them, and so forth. What I don't think gets as much attention is what about the positive side of that? What about what are your growth goals, Mr. CEO? What about do you plan to expand? What about how are you handling onboarding or offboarding of employees? What happens when somebody comes into your business and is giving access to your data? What happens when they're asked to leave or exit the company? Do you have a process for that? Are you having conversations about disaster recovery? I talk to a lot of people that understand data backup. That's an easy one, right? Our customers have data. They don't want to lose it. And should they go looking for it, they need to know where to find it. But what about the conversation of disaster? What do we do when the worst should happen? What do we do when that server fails? What's the plan for, hey, we got to spin the server up and get to it. We've got to get our employees back to work. We've got to be able to access our financial software to do payroll next week if our,
Wow.
if our basement floods, things like that. So I know it goes beyond just, again, the technology. You need that stuff. You need to be able to prove through data, facts, figures, risk assessments that Mr. Business Owner, here are the problems as we perceive them today, and here's what we're going to do about them. The other conversation you have to have, and by the way, Jeremy, this is done through asking questions more so than dictation. Okay. When I go into a business, I am in student mode. I am there to learn, I am there to ask questions. I'm not there to educate. I'm not there to blather on about how great my response time is, or how smart my technicians are, or how fast I respond, or how clean my invoices are. Listen, if you're talking about that in 2023, those are, look, that's it's old school stuff. You should not be bragging about that stuff. That should be baked in. But to be able to come in and ask the right questions for each of those people in their business roles and inviting them to share with you, that's the secret sauce. Because you take the technical factual data, you take the business conversation, which by the way is where you build posture, it's where you build trust, and it's where that prospect decides if they like, know, and trust you. Right? Sales 101. People buy from people they like, know, and trust. That's how we achieve that. If we achieve that in discovery, we then come to the closing table with the formal presentation for services.
Wow. um, yeah, I agree with all of that. And I really appreciate how you broke all of that down. I think that these are things that, especially for technical people, might be difficult to hear, but I think you're right. And I have a technical background. I was the same way. I had to learn to put the business first, become a salesperson, empathize with the customer, build trust with people, right? So I'm curious about your journey because we alluded to this earlier. So 20 years experience in IT, 17 years founder of Cortec, and you mentioned 12 years ago something happened. I'm curious about that point in time. What happened?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a thought, and then I'll answer your question. First of all, Jeremy, I applaud you for seeing that, but I want to be deliberate in sharing this message with your audience. Your business, your MSP, must become capable of having these conversations, must become capable of effectively selling. That doesn't mean it has to be you. What I would challenge everybody listening to think about is, instead of this idea of, if you want something done right, do it yourself. I would challenge you instead to think, if you want something done right, find the best person to do it. If you are looking at the challenge of becoming the sales professional, becoming somebody adept at discovery, if you're an introvert, if you're not somebody who the top of your knowledge set is people skills or soft skills, I'm not telling you you have to become that person. What I am telling you is I strongly recommend you find that person. Okay. It's absolutely the case that if you own your company, you can be the best technical resource who knows that side of the business. But be honest with yourself. Draw your organizational chart as it sits today, and draw it as you'd like for it to look in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, and draw some empty circles up there. What positions would you like to fill if in your heart of hearts you recognize, hey, I could not do that, or it would take too much of my time to become that. So I want to part with that thought and then set it down. Yeah, like a lot of people, I how I started my journey is I was actually in college. So here's where the 20 years thing comes in, because hopefully I don't look like I'm that freaking old. Um,
No.
my first real job, I was 19, 20 years old, somewhere there, and I was working at a big box retail store selling computers, fixing broken things, right? And at that stage in my life, I love technology. Room with a couple of guys in college, we used to build computers in fish tanks and cardboard boxes, and just because we could, we'd have 5 or 6 of them. We'd be playing EverQuest. I mean, we were nerds. Okay, that's who we were. We loved computers. And so we got it in our heads, like a lot of people, that hey, because I love computers, I'm just going to start a business that does that. And also, like a lot of entrepreneurial spirited people, which I think that I am, and probably many of your audience is, I had to have a job where I worked for the man to learn those things. And so while I was in college, I did that. I worked for somebody else. I learned a lot of what not to do, right? But the biggest thing that I learned that the retail business wasn't the service business. Okay, peddling product, asking people to buy warranties on computers, stuffing their shopping carts full of ink cartridges and reams of paper was not
Mm.
what I wanted to do. I was a lot more uh, aligned with serving people, and people that would come in who needed help, who had challenges, they had questions. I found that I gravitated more to that. So, like most entrepreneurs, I said, screw the man, I'm done with this. I'm going to do my own thing, right? So, actually, how I started back in 2006 was the year it was formal. I had a little break fix computer shop. It was me and my business partner. He worked with me at the time. Fun fact of the day. So he worked there about a year before I did. I got this job. We were in college. He tried to get me fired in week one. He decided real quick he did not personally like me. And that was mostly because later what made this work and what has made it work for 20 years is that he was that operations person, that fact driven person, that for you disc personality aficionados, he was a high C personality. I came in, new kid on campus with an attitude, kind of sales demeanor. So we clashed immediately. But we figured out over the years, months into years as we worked together, there was a synergy there. There was nothing I couldn't sell and service, meaning the conversation with the client, and there was nothing he couldn't fix. And so we said, hey,
Mm.
with our powers combined, we're going to start a company, right? And so we did. But for the first handful of years, Jeremy, it was just that classic break fix model. It was he and I in a little sardine can, a little 300 square foot office. We did service calls for little old ladies in their home. We made all of our money popping in RAM chips, installing, Norton antivirus, and plugging up computers. It was not glamorous, but that was the biz. It was that business model that if you link back to like the .com era, your Circuit Cities, your Comp USA's, your Computer Renaissance, that was the biz. You and probably nobody on this call needs me to tell you that that business model largely went by the wayside through the early 2000s, right? So we had to, as a function of survival, move away from um, residential, right? And just break fix $20 here, $50 there, $100 there. That wasn't sustainable. And so, 2, 3, 4 years into business, we started doing business services, but we were still break fix. It was still like, hey, instead of selling one computer to Meemaw, we were selling 10 computers to an accounting office, as an example, right? But then it got more, we just found organically we're getting more and more opportunities, and the networks got bigger and scarier. They got more complex, and that sort of forced our learning curve. We had to go from the Jedi Grandmaster of the desktop to somebody that understood networks, right? And that's a learning curve. And that was okay until about 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. And then somebody one day uttered this phrase, managed services. I never heard of it at that point. Now, disclaimer, I'm in rural Kentucky. We're about 5 years behind the times. So sometimes we don't hear about things as quickly as people in big places. But no, I heard about it, and I started to listen, started to read. And it was the first time, Jeremy, that I got this idea of, I see. In the break fix world, a busy day is one person having 3, 4 service calls. That's a few $100, maybe 1,000 a day. Yeah, I'm never going to get to where I want to go in life doing that. And when I learned about things like MRR, right? When I learned
Mm.
about things like automation, when I learned about things like, oh, wow, look what one person can do on a help desk with the right tools in place. Look how much more We can expand beyond the individual. That was the first time it really became clear to me that this business was scalable, right? And so we made the conscientious decision to go all in. We made the decision that, hey, we're getting out of residential services, break fix services entirely. We're going full bore into this managed idea. We're going to figure out how to manage and monitor and automate as much as we possibly can. And that worked great through, I don't know, 2015 or so. And then, like everybody else here, cybersecurity showed up. All of a sudden, it was a priority. We were getting, all these things forced down our throat. And then the conversation became not just how do we proactively care for computers? How do we proactively help consult you? But now it was also how do we proactively protect you from the bad people out there? And so for us in that way, it happened sort of organically. But what was intentional was the alignment of training. There are two things I think are true that had to happen. First one, we had to commit to training personally, for me, myself personally, my business partner, as well as our staff. But then the second thing was we had to find people, not just people, but companies to align with. Being a managed service provider in 2023, one, two, three, four people, I don't think you can do it by yourself. I think it's very ambitious. I think it absolutely requires that whole saying, it takes a village, right? I think as an MSP, it takes a village. You have to have tool sets, you have to have vendors, you have to have products, you have to have PSA tools, RMM tools, cybersecurity tools, network assessment tools. When you look at what it takes today to really call yourself a managed service provider, it takes you, the people around you, and a lot of strategic partnerships with vendors and purveyors of, shall we say, tools. Um, so that was the fast track. Did I answer your question?
So, yes. Um, I'm curious to jump back a little bit. You mentioned, uh, for founders out there, for MSPs out there, business owners out there, if sales isn't your background, right? So actually, for you, Josh, I just wanted to clarify: did you go into core tech with a sales background, or was that something you had to learn and pick up? Was there like
Uh,
a
Excellent question. I think it's fair to say a little bit of both. And why I say a little bit is me as a person. I am blessed in that um, I like that part of the business. I am a talker. I am a lover of people. I'm comfortable in front of the room. So I think it's fair to say that being a quote unquote salesperson is in my DNA. But I think it would be an injustice to just say, oh, I just magically knew how to do everything. Okay. That is definitely not the case. Becoming a sales professional is a trainable discipline. Just like, here's the example I'll use. Just like if you decide to be an IT professional and you're going to decide, hey, I'm going to take the A plus, I'm going to take the Net plus, Security plus, Microsoft Track, whatever that education path looks like for you. It's a very deliberate and structured education approach, right? You pick up a book, you attend a class, you go to a school, you go online training, whatever that is. But there's this path that you take, and at the end of that path is earned knowledge. You take certifications, you get you pass those exams, you get a little piece of paper that says, "Hey, I studied and I know what I'm doing." Right? I think the challenge with becoming, and I think this is the answer to your question, Jeremy, is that path isn't as clearly laid out on the business side of the house. Okay,
I agree.
there's not like a 4-year university where you learn to go sell managed IT services. It doesn't exist. There's tech schools everywhere that teach you how to do that on the technical side, right? So I think that's the first challenge, and it kind of gets back to what I said, and what I mean is you have to seek that out, seek wisdom, right? It's one of the seven decisions, terrific book for you readers, The Traveler's Gift. You have to be intentional about, hey, this is a skill set that I am going to learn, and that knowledge is out there. It's there through books. I'm a big voracious reader. I always challenge people on what are you doing to take your learning curve seriously, because the thing that happens after school, after college, after etc., is that there's nobody there to hold you accountable. So it comes in the form of saying, look, this is a discipline. Okay, there's processes out there, there's frameworks out there that you have to learn. But the idea that you just wake up and because you have the gift of gab, because you can talk to people, that doesn't make you a sales professional. It makes you an
Agree.
extrovert, but it doesn't make you a sales professional.
I want to loop what you just said now back to I remember earlier you mentioned for the owners out there that you don't want to force, hey, you got to do sales, you got to learn sales if you're a technical person, right? You could find somebody who's good at that. So I want to drill into the nuance of that because
Okay.
I'll say generally I disagree with that.
Okay.
I would say I tried that personally and it didn't work out for me. because I was the one, as the founder, as the business owner, who knew my customers the best. And when I hired somebody who has a lot of experience in sales, traditional sales, they applied what they knew from their past experience, but it didn't work for our customers. That's just one example, one very nuanced example, but I'm curious. So, what I ended up having to do after bringing in the sales professional, after learning what I learned from them, was to sort of incorporate it and integrate it, and still, as the business owner, figure out how to do sales for my business, for my market. Um, and I still had to learn it at the end. What because I feel like you did something similar, right? Like you learned it yourself as the CEO. So how do you reconcile that?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not surprised to hear you challenge that at all, Jeremy. Further, I would actually agree with your sentiment, but here's what I mean. I find, so me being a sales professional, I also coach and teach and train and align with other
Mm,
sales professionals. I see every variety of people that call themselves a professional come through our classes and our teaching and our coaching. Everybody from car salesman, insurance salesman, maybe a Kirby vacuum salesman, network marketing, you name it. So I think the first thing is identifying that not all sales are created equal.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's first and foremost. Secondly, and the reason I agree with you is I do find it to be true that most, if not all, or nearly all, sales professionals that come from another industry into this industry, there's a lot of retraining that has to happen
Mm,
because they lead with a solution first approach. They got it in their
I
head
agree.
that the best way to be a sales professional is I'm going to master my product pusher. I'm going to understand all the features, the benefits, the bells, the whistles, why version 2 is better than version 1. And I'm going to go into my client and I'm going to wow them with my product knowledge. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that understanding what it is that you sell is not important. You absolutely, if you're going to sell for an MSP, you should understand your solution stack. You should understand the products that you're selling and why you're a Sophos house over a 40net house or whatever the case would be. However, I think it is exactly the wrong approach for managed IT companies. And here is why. If you're leading with your solutions, what you're doing what I call the spray and pray method. You're just spraying all over them and praying that something sticks. That something that comes out of your mouth about your super great computers or your super secure firewall or your super cool BDR, your cloud vendor, or your VoIP phone happens to stick with that prospect. And it just works out that they have a problem or a need. Here's the thing. You don't your clients don't care about you. Okay. Everybody's favorite subject is themselves. All
That's what I
right.
keep saying.
They they do not care what firewall you sell. They do not care what your EDR product is, who your MDR team is, who you're not. They don't care. Okay. What they care about is their business moving forward and being successful if they invite you to be a part of that. And so, because that's the case, we do not bond with our prospects and ultimately our clients based on our solutions. We bond with them based on their problems and their needs. Okay. So I agree with you because if you come into this thinking, hey, I know so much about technology that I'm just going to wow my prospects, to be honest with you, Jeremy, I find that oftentimes that actually gets in the way of you being successful selling managed IT. Now, disclaimer, if your business model is if you're a VAR or a reseller or you're selling product or you're doing projects, low voltage stuff, access control, security cameras, cable pulling, by all means, it's price competition, it's a commodity, go get it. But if you're selling managed IT, if you're selling support agreements, vendor management, professional services, if you're selling what I call the big brain stuff, leading with the solution first approach is not the way to do it, which is also why I think you probably didn't have the best experience with a quote sales pro and why many people listening are not having success with that approach or with those people who take that approach.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, thank you for explaining that so eloquently. I could hear the coaching come out in your explanation. Um, I think I've been talking to several MSP owners on the podcast, and one common thread I find is this empathy, understanding the customers, customer first, their business first, like you mentioned. I also wanted to note that the way you lead with the customer is you ask questions, right? This goes back to what you were talking about, the questions that you ask, asking the right questions. I've so many questions, but I gotta pick and choose what I ask you because there's so much here. I want to ask you about coaching, and I want to ask you about your mentors in your
Okay.
journey. So, earlier when you were talking about learning, you said you mentioned finding mentors. I'm curious if you know if that means that you maybe had a mentor in your career, in your journey, and how did that impact you, and why do you do coaching now, and
Uh,
what's that like?
That's an awesome question, Jerry. I'm happy to answer that. So first of all, I've had a couple of mentors. I'm somebody, okay. I'm gonna organize my thoughts here. I'm gonna choose to answer your
Uh,
question this way. First of all, I think every person you encounter every day has something to offer and something to teach you. So I think it very much begins with an attitude that, hey, if I want to grow and learn, I have to encounter and experience people around me, and I have to listen to where they've been. That old saying that experience is the best teacher, I don't agree with that. I think other people's experience is the best teacher, and I think in this very short snap of a finger life that we live, reinventing the wheel or starting from ground zero is too much for the average person. That's the essence of a mentor. Somebody you know or somebody you should attach yourself to has been where you want to go. They've learned what you need to learn. They've gone through the lumps, the challenges, the losses, and you by aligning with the mentor can shortchange that. Okay. I
wow,
shared with you
wow,
my good friend Alex. He is my mentor in managed IT, has been a great person, founded a terrific company. But I've had other mentors as well. I have a public speaking mentor who, when I first got going in this, I joined a terrific organization called Toastmasters.
Toastmasters.
Yeah. Okay. So if those of you who are afraid of like I don't want to present, I get nervous. If you're the sweaty, shaky type, go look up your local Toastmasters chapter. It's very, very inexpensive to join. The time commitment is low, and it's a perfect place to practice becoming a professional. Speaking is their context, but it translates, I think, to presenting and selling. So that was somebody, and I'll share with you a piece of advice that was given to me actually very early on. His name is Dale Smith, wonderful human being. He's a published author. In fact, he knows Zig Ziglar personally. Pretty cool guy. Um, he early identified. We met, and I was excited and charged up, and I'm trying to drive my business forward, and that whole take that whole excitement on fire is better than motivation on ice approach. And we did some speeches, and he identified very quickly. And Jeremy, something he said to me early that has stuck with me for years was he said, Josh, it's clear to me that you're great at talking at people. What you need to learn is to converse with people. And it's one of those multi-million dollar comments that just got seared into my brain that has always stuck with me. Okay. Anyway, I digress. Absolutely, you should intentionally seek mentorship. Okay. Somebody, again, has been where you want to go. That could come in the form of a sales coach. It could come in the form of an IT trainer. It could come in the form of public speaking. It really, let's say it doesn't matter, but there's a lot of, shall we say, seats at your boardroom. If I were to use this metaphor, think of it like your board of directors for your personal professional development. I need somebody in business. I need somebody in IT. I need somebody in banking and investing. I need somebody in et cetera. Fill in the gaps that make sense for you. But I think intentionally seeking mentors is one of the most foundational things to personal professional development. And I think everybody should actively be doing it.
100%. And I just want to tie back, what you said about not talking at people, but conversing back and forth with someone. I would interpret talking at someone as what you mentioned before. Oh, we have this cool tech. Hey, look at these new features, right? New product update. That kind of presentation I consider as talking at someone. That conversation, again, is asking questions, right? Talking about them. Um, Gosh, what's the story with Toastmaster, by the way? I'm very curious, right? Because my understanding of Toastmaster, it's a place where you practice public speaking skills. Just listening to you right now, you're an amazing speaker. Like just how
Thank
you
you.
explain things, and it's hyper clear, hyper precise. Was that not always the case? Like, why did you join Toastmasters? Like, yeah.
I want to reiterate what I said a moment ago. It's a trainable skill, right? It's not something I woke up with one day and magically I could speak and teach and coach and present. Um, it goes without saying my soft skills and some kind of my quote unquote DNA lent itself to that, but it's a trainable skill. It's like being a carpenter or a welder or a plumber. It's like any other trade. You can absolutely be a newbie, then an apprentice, and then a master. Okay. And I would encourage everybody listening to think of it that way, treat it like an education path. So the answer to your question is I recognize that was a growth path I wanted to take. I said to myself, this is clearly what I'm more wired to do, and but everything up until my life at that point had just been what I made of it. Lots of gut instincts or firing from the hip or making it my own. And don't get me wrong, I think there's a place for that. I think there's a place for having your persona, being authentic. I'm big on authenticity. Don't be somebody else. There's only one you, so be you. But it was an intentional decision because I recognized I needed to be in a place where I could hone those skills. So, again, further to answer your question, fundamentally, Toastmasters is two things. It's a public speaking organization, but also a leadership organization. Because when you become a part of it, you also become a part of clubs, right? So you can serve as in various roles, speakers, presenters, what they call topic masters, evaluators. You can serve at the local, area, regional, district, state, national level. So you get that being a part of something bigger than you effect, and many people go to it for that. They don't have a great opportunity to learn to become a leader and to learn to maybe you don't have a collaborative environment readily available to you. So on the one hand, that's a safe place to go. The second hand, and you said it, and I agree, it's a place to practice. I'll use the same word that Dale used, my mentor, my speaking mentor. He referred to Toastmasters as a laboratory. And I think the word is the
Mm,
best possible word because it's a place to experiment. It's a place to go where you are safe to fail, where your paycheck or your job is not on the line. You can try new things, you can stumble and fall, you can see what works and what doesn't, and you're surrounded by people who are there with the same goal. So it's a safe space to get feedback. I think that's something that's missing in education.
mm.
Structured, personal, actionable feedback so that you can intentionally and inherently grow and develop.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that. I think I wish feedback or learning how to listen to feedback was something that I learned in school instead of out in the world and made the mistake there. But I eventually learned it. I think a lot of our business owners can must have gone on a similar journey there too. I just want to reiterate something. There's no comment. I'm not adding anything to this, but you saw something that blew my mind earlier, which is the most valuable experience isn't your experience, but it's other people's experience. I'm actually curious, what other person's experience affected you personally the most, if you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. So I think that the way I'm going to choose to respond is first of all, I do look for and constantly look for in I'm going to answer your question two ways. In a professional capacity, I'm always looking for who's the person I want to model after, who has the business I'm trying to become, who has the skill set or the lifestyle or the income or the time freedom. If I see it and I want it, rather than like coveting that or rather than being like egomaniacal about that, I'm attracted to that. I want to understand how that person has that thing that I want because I believe in the notion that if you want to have more in life, you first have to do more. And in order to do more, you first have to be more. So that's my answer in general terms. But specifically, I think like most people, I look at like my mother and my father.
Mm.
Nobody, you can't get past the fact that in your life, we're all raised, right? We have some family experience. I think the sad truth that in modern day America, most of those home lives now are more challenging than they were maybe 50 years ago. But that's not the crux of the conversation. But I look at like my mom and my dad, both of whom were loving people, but I will share with you, Jeremy. I didn't have that nuclear family household. My parents separated and divorced very early for me in life. Both got remarried and did it again, and a lot of stuff to say this. Home life, personal life, upbringing was very tough. I lived a life of having most of the things I needed, very few of the things I wanted. I have a wonderful Nana who's my grandmother who was very rearing, but the reality is this, Jeremy. In many ways, I had a handful of lessons about what to do or who to be. I'll use my mother as an example. She's an eternal optimist. Okay, there's nothing I ever did in my life. There was never a day where my mother wasn't at least encouraging. Right? She was always supportive of the things that I did. But if I'm being honest, she was also very absent. The reason she was absent is because she had to work. She was a single mom for a lot of years. She had to provide for two kids and that whole story, right? My dad, on the other hand, his favorite sport was not raising us. He preferred not to play the role of dad. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my dad, but he provided me an excellent example of the type of father specifically that I really didn't want to be. Okay, that doesn't mean there's anything bad about him. He lived his life on his terms. He does things his way and he has happiness. But between my two parents, I was able to say, hey, I don't want to be like my mother in that she was forced to constantly be away from her two kids who she would love nothing more than to raise. And further, I don't want to be my father who had the option and the choice to be an engaged father, to be, shall we say, a providing man of the house. So, in a lot of ways, Jeremy, the answer to your question is I got the Encyclopedia Britannica on what not to be. Not so much awesome role models in the house. Now, I say that with the asterisk that I chose to look at anything you would colorize in my life as a struggle. I made the conscientious decision as I grew up to ask myself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? I do not, I have zero patience for and zero respect for victimhood mentality. I can't stand people who function that way. If you're a crybaby or a bellyacre or life happens to you or woe, why me or woe is me, I can't stand those people. I don't want to be around them. They sap my energy. So I say that to say this. I made the conscientious choice to look at how I was raised and the people around me, and I chose where the lessons were there. Hey, I want to take something from this. I want to learn my mother's endless encouragement and something that resembles career martyrdom, right? Working to the bone. But at the same time, it also taught me, Jeremy, that I knew that I wanted to be present, for example, in my daughter's life. My daughter is my why and everything. She's my world, the most important thing to me. She's the reason that I have ever done anything. And so it was a day-to-day reminder to be present, to be in the moment, and to do the things you're supposed to do, not because somebody handed me the model of how to do it, but because they showed me at least an example of something I didn't want to do or didn't want to be.
Wow. Uh, I'm speechless. I don't have anything to say to that. I'm just gonna let that absorb. I do want to end on this topic here of coaching. Um, so, what kind of coaching do you do? And why is that important?
Well, that's how long do you have on the podcast, Jeremy?
Because I feel like just talking to you, like we've learned so much, right? Whether it's technical, business, or just from your experiences. Uh, and I feel like I feel something, and I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's going to impact me.
It's indigestion. Take some Tums, you'll be fine, buddy.
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll answer your question, I think, succinctly. So, specifically speaking, Jeremy, where I've honed my skills and what I do in the industry and the channel is specifically in sales, prospecting, and closing. Now, I've got some, I don't know, expertise is a strong word. I'm a very aware person when it comes to marketing, but everything I do in a professional capacity really is about a sales process, right? It's a sales funnel, I think is the answer. How do I have those first initial steps with the client? What conversation do I have when I'm in front of that prospect? How do I guide that prospect to the next steps and get their permission, posture up such that they share with me? And ultimately, Jeremy, ultimately the answer is I teach people how to close deals. I teach people how to handle objections. I teach people how to ask for the sale. Believe it or not, there's a lot of great presenters out there that are terrible salespeople because they don't know how to close. I see people that talk themselves out of sales every day of the week. So succinctly, it's that. If you want something more personal from my bag of tricks, I'm also a TTI Success Insight Certified DISC consultant, DISC. So if you're not familiar with that, it's a behavioral assessment. If you've ever done like a Myers-Briggs or a Strength Finders, one of those kind of things, it's a lot like that, but it's very business practical. It's kind of grown into a passion for me, and I'll the risk of sounding like this is a commercial. I'll just simply say this: DISC is a tool to assess human behavior, how we communicate, and the environments in which we're best successful. So let me translate that to business. It's a
Mm-hmm.
way for me to work with somebody, Jeremy, like yourself, and through a DISC personality assessment and getting to know you,
Hmm.
where are you best suited in a business? Are you is your DNA programmed to push your brand forward? Are you what we would call like a high D personality, dominant, driving, pioneering? Are you somebody that should lead your company forward? Or are you more of a passive personality? Are you more of what I would call a high C personality, a compliant personality? You're better with process and procedure. And are you the person really that should be keeping the
Interesting.
house in order? right? And then in the middle, there's the people. So you have task-oriented people and you have people-oriented people. People-oriented people are in the DISC model, it's INS personalities. They're people who are nurturing, they're loyal, they're good listeners, they're in tune with the relationships that we have both in our businesses, but also with their clients. And I say all that to say this: what I have found as a professional all these years is it's a terrific window into the human part of our business, and
Yeah.
allows us as business owners to take inventory of ourselves, become aware of how do I best communicate and how do I best receive communication, and therefore where do I best fit in my business. It's like it's an Einstein quote. I'll butcher it. I'll get it close though. It's more or less this idea, and by the way, it's also my indictment on public education. We won't go there, but it's this idea that
We have a
everybody
lot in common.
is well, good. Hopefully, we'll do this again. But it's this idea that everybody's born a genius, Jeremy. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll spend its whole life thinking that it's stupid. Okay, now, I'm close on that paraphrasing. You can probably Google it. But I think it captures the essence of what I mean. I think when you as a business owner can step back and understand how do I communicate, where do I best fit, what's my best environment? Should I be in a tree or in a bowl of water, so to speak? Back to the metaphor, right? That's where it starts. Because then you as a business professional, you can say, okay, this is the best environment for me, either around lots of people or away from lots of people. Here's the best environment for me, filled with lots of tasks where my attention to detail is not quite what it should be. And then from there, that gives you the ability to adapt and to learn, hey, how do I fill those spaces? Because here's the thing about communication. I'll leave it with this. In our business and in life, we're all communicators. That's the point of this, I think, is how do we grow our brand? How do we get to where we're going? The challenge with communication is thus: communication is done on the listener's terms. And I think, quite frankly, that gets to the crux of your question a moment ago. These salespeople who weren't successful, it doesn't matter what your message is or how strongly you're convicted about it or how you choose to convey it. If you don't know how to involve your listener and for them to receive it. And that's the part that's missed. And I think that when you combine all the things we do through coaching, training, teaching, processes, tools, questions, when you put it all into a blender and pour it out, that's what it is. How do I best articulate? How do I best communicate with my prospects to get them to bond with me and agree that we should do business together?
I feel like we could do a whole other hour just on the coaching aspect. I felt like that dumb fish for so many years. And I don't know if I really had anybody to show me the water. I kind of had to find, the ocean
I
and
understand.
figure it out. I mean, and I've just been climbing that tree, trying to find the ocean. Wow. Thank you so much, Josh. So last question is, as we head out, who should reach out to you? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so I would love to think I'm a resource for anybody in the channel. I don't know everything, but I have been there and done that. I always like to tell people, look, I've never walked a day in your shoes, but I've walked a similar path. And so if I can be a resource to you, I would love to be. And if I don't know the answer, I'm probably 1 degree of separation from a relationship with somebody who does. So in that way, I'd love to connect. All the obvious stuff, right? You can find my company, Cortec LLC. You can find me on LinkedIn as well through my coaching stuff with Chartech at chartech.net. Listen, however you can find me, Jeremy, I'm also fine if you share uh, my contact information. But the reality is this: I'm a big believer on what you put out into the universe comes back to you. I think we all have a moral, ethical imperative to be a contribution mindset, and that's what I choose to be. So I'd welcome introductions, people of however I can serve and whatever value I can share.
Thank you so much, Josh. And links will be in the description. I'm gonna sign off with this. So, MSPs who are listening, um, our MSPs use Telivy to win new clients and monitor their existing clients and help their clients meet compliance. So head over to our website, telivy.com, telivy.com, to learn more. Also, podcast listeners, if you like Telivy, tell us you came from the podcast. We'll give you 20% off the upgrade too. Thank you so much, Josh. Really, really enjoyed speaking with you. I hope I can pick your brain with another session, bring you back sometime real soon as well to go over your wealth of knowledge and wisdom and experience. Thank you so much.
You as well, Jeremy. I'm honored and humbled. I appreciate you very much. Take care.
Thank you. See you all next time.